Anybody like to have a guess where that is? It's actually Cobar. It's a gold mine. Andrew and I went out to have a look at this site. They actually, as part of the gold mining process, they go down. The water comes in, the groundwater comes in, and they pump it out. And they're pumping deeper. And they wanted us to look at a bigger disposal. But we saw all these trucks of water sitting at the siding at the gold mine. And we said, what do you actually use the water for? You've got a water problem, but what do you truck the extra water in? Oh, we wash it down, wash the ore down. So we made the lateral thought, why don't you test the water that you're pumping out of the mine causing you the problem to see if you can use it in your washdown process. By the addition of a few extra chemicals, problem solved. And there was a nice couple of cases of scotch that didn't get declared. So salinity impacts, as Andrew sort of implied, a whole range of impacts across the landscape, including community assets, people. West Wyalong is supplied with pretty poor water quality. It's got the best renal dialysis unit outside Sydney because it's actually got a problem they have to deal with. The kidneys are all shutting down when you're about, if you're my age, you've probably got a shot kidney. A lot of our salinity problems occurred with those wet 50s, and that's the rainfall and water levels around Wellington. Similar pattern through here. So you'll see these are sites that we deal with day to day, and they're within 60 k's. I live at Wellington. There's about 60 k's from my office. This is at Cumnock. That's gypsum and sodium bicarbonate site. This is up at Spring Ridge. It's an inland acid sulphate soil. The pH is about 2. And this is the area that Andrew was referring to. I saw that place cleared and I saw it become saline. And that's a site near Mumble that's actually lime, calcium carbonate. So very different, and that's that same site again. Sodium bicarbonate site. The previous one there was the Mumble site, and things get wet. When we tried to sow saltbush, that's on the top of a hill. And the landholder was extremely pissed off, to say the least. But it jumped. It was really intuitive to us because it actually showed there was these series of wet spots where they kept on bogging in the landscape, and it gave us the indication that there were barriers underneath in the landscape. The water would go down, and I'll show you that in a sec. So we see a lot of these sites around the place. That's before and afters. Sorry, I'm in your way. This is Bottle Bend down at near Mildura. pH 1.6. I've got another slide I didn't put in here, but one of the commissioners of the Murray-Darling Basin was wearing Gucci shoes and he stepped about there. He got back to Mildura, which is about 15 k's away, and it ripped all the glue out of his shoe, and he's flopping along. But yeah, that's only adjacent to the.
Just put it in context. What's the pH of bleach, for example?
pH of bleach is about 16. Yeah. Stomach acid's about 2.
What's an ideal pH?
7. 6.5, 7 for soil.
Land?
Yeah, for soil. Yep.
So battery acid would be what, half?
Battery acid is about 0.5, something like that. Sulfuric acid, yep. Where am I going? So there's a lot of variation. We see a lot of variation. This is our old the geology map. We're sitting just out here. This is a hill end trough country, Warrumbungles, plains. The area that Andrew and I work in is the most complicated area of Australia in terms of geology. It is very, very interesting. Great place to work and a good teaching ground for us. The other thing Andrew pointed out, oils ain't oils and salts ain't salts. You'll see sodium chloride salts, which is the normal sea salt, table salt. Most of the sites in the Central West are sodium bicarbonate. We will see some magnesium sulfate sites, which are black and smell of rotten egg gas. They're very hard to revegetate. And the salt concentration, generally on average day past Dubbo, you get about 207 tonnes of salt dissolved in the water. Goes past on an average day. That's how much water goes through on a scale. So with every irrigation cycle, somewhere like at a Narromine, you get 12.5 tonnes per hectare of salt applied to that land. Hence, in our lifetime, our professional lifetime, we've seen a lot of irrigation farms, which were former cotton farms, become cattle farms. They've basically sold themselves out. You've seen that one. The salt is distributed through the catchments. This is actually tons of salt coming in to, this is a very old slide, it's year 2000, September 2000 I think. Basically coming into Burrendong Dam, about 116,000 tonnes of salt dissolved in the water coming in, relatively fresh water but a lot of water. But coming out, going into the Murray-Darling system, into the Darling, it's only 7,000 tonnes. The rest of it is parked on irrigation land, in towns, in kettles, in kidneys, all around the place. So you see some, and there are some sub-catchments that are quite, have little bits of salinity. Interesting, you'll see this is a Cudgegong River. The little spikes in tonnages. This is actually the Yamble gauging station. There's a nice little salinity hotspot that actually has an impact on the river very close to that area. Urban stuff, Gun Street in Forbes, Western Sydney, we have a lot of work to do. That I've seen similar, I've seen about 6 of these in my career around New South Wales, where the structure of the pier has just totally degraded. Andrew and I were going to Hay one day, and the bloke was out, this is a motel in Forbes, he was washing the salt off. And we call this a drive-by shooting. So he took the photo, came back, and he'd spent all this time washing it off. 7 days later, it's back there. So, yeah. Impact in an urban situation is as much as a rural situation. Roads, you get that classic, roads aren't built for water to come up, roads are built to seal water going into them. Urban impact, this is Dubbo. This is Troy Gully, a significant salinity place. This is also an old photo, but that house there, when they put the swimming pool in, they dug the hole, and overnight they put the shell in, and the shell floated to the top with the groundwater rise that was there. The water use in here, have a guess how much some of these doctors and lawyers use per year, per hectare, water use. Cotton's about 7. 42 megs a year they use in their urban garden. On the lawn. On the lawn. Incredible water use. And it drives the salinity process. Hence you get big issues like that they were originally going to try and develop on. That's a classic photo of the water use. We're Project Dubbo. We actually did a project a number of years ago to say that the council was one of the biggest problems in their water use. So we installed a network all through the town, and that's in Church Street. It's a Sunday morning. We're drilling holes. The coffee shop wasn't there at that stage, otherwise it would have probably been there. But this is after 2 inches of rain. This is what the council were doing to the parks, just watering the hell out of it. And a closer look, when I was in a helicopter doing that flight, came back and most of the field looked like that. So just incredible water use. So we put in a program to monitor the water going into the system. Number 1 oval, 2, 3, pool, rose garden, croquet lawn and the general area. Which was the highest water use area? Anyone? No, highest water use? Rose garden. I was sitting on the drill rig and I was drilling the hole and I just put a little bit of downward pressure on the hydraulics and the whole thing went down to 27 metres. Straight like that. So they put equivalent of 45 megs of water onto that little space. Incredible amount of water. And this only got using the same scale, 0.001, the croquet lawn. It was a real exercise in showing them how much they needed to actually put on, what actually needed to be used for growing plants. Water use in towns, in an urban sense, East Ridge is some of the smaller parts of town. Equus is a bigger town, so this is the maximum 12.5 megs per hectare is the average for those blocks. So a lot of water being used. And what do you actually need in a wet year? 0.2. So we're trying to just explain. So impacts, Andrew's talked about that. These are some shots, heritage impacts. This is Bathurst. The courthouse has some major impacts. And this is we took this photo and then 6 months later they repaired it. And this was the damage. This is a cellar and you can put your hand down into that cellar and you can touch water. It's in, so. How do you fix that? Infrastructure project like that, you actually try and break the cycle. You actually need to put a barrier in there, a geotextile barrier, or actually the old blokes used to use slate in buildings, and slate's very effective. And we tracked the water use in towns. We found 6 marijuana plants in roofs by these little terrace houses using incredible amounts of water. We've basically got every water meter and figured out how much water they're using through town to show people what the water use actually is. We were surprised that Bathurst used equally, if not more, water on each garden than Dubbo. And we thought, why is that? And it's the fescues. Fescues don't use water in wintertime, but people love putting water on them. So they don't need to water their gardens in Bathurst at all from about March on, but they're always watering them. So that's where the water use is going, causing those problems. Yeah, just damage. Then this is basically what we're starting to talk about. This is a flat-lying systems of rocks in the Wellington North area. You can see how they're basically, everything is horizontal. This is actually a clay stone layer and an ironstone layer, and you've got sandstone above, and then you've got that hard indurated layer with salt sitting on the top, and then below there's a layer of shale. Just some shots of salinity problems, and we work all over New South Wales. Currently Andrew and I are working here at Mildura with the almond industry, trying to sort out water use in the Murray-Darling Basin program. And right, that was just a teaser to say that we find salt pretty interesting, but now we'll get to the pick up the right.
So what are you doing with the almond industry?
With the almond, with the trading industries going on, so there's a lot of Chinese have bought land in New South Wales. Victoria shut them down from installing any more almond developments. The water trade from Shepparton, the old dairy farms, is coming to New South Wales. So we've got the river. Victoria shut down. Chinese investment is buying a stack of land and putting developments on New South Wales land using Victorian water, and we can't. There's 3,825 hectares in the last 8 months of development, and they pulse the lines for every 75 minutes that as almonds get irrigated. So there's a huge water use issue, and it's driving salinity in the river, and it's causing salinity changes in the river, which New South Wales government will have to pay for. So each EC unit's about $2 million. So we could be up for a significant amount of dollars. So we're trying to get through the
You've got a fun job.
policy issues. So this is the stuff we find interesting. Capertee Valley, how do landscapes work? We've got this hydrological landscape framework that allows us to, what the plumbing of the landscape is, how things work. Talking about the variability in a landscape, how things vary, what you can actually do once you understand what's going on, and then what the priority and hazard of that landscape is. So that was that site that I showed. That, for interest, that header was bogged about there. So these are ironstone layers. Water goes in through these horizontal layers, and you've got those repeats. There's 7 of those repeats down that landscape in that geology that's that way. So you go closer to Wellington, everything flips that way. So it's where you've got the intersection of the geologies, you'll have a salt site. So it's the way the geology is stacked. Basalt caps, you'll have underneath the water goes in, hits a glassified layer or a harder layer, and the salt will pop out on the edge of the catchment there. Most people have the view that salt sites are on the lower. In a lot of cases they aren't.
Is that formation just down here at the end of the road, and the basalts have been washed off, and now we've got
I'm not quite sure.
running streams is what they're examining?
Running streams is, I guess, yeah, it's actually running streams are one. We called it, it's an example we'll work through in a minute. I can't think of the name we called it actually. This is the granites, which is basically a different unit, sorry.
Which is the example of Capertee Valley?
We haven't come to it yet. This is just a bit of background to give you a bit of feel. So this is the Obley granite. If you're at Dubbo Zoo going south, or particularly to Yeovil, you've got these hard granites that are very shallow soils and sandy soils, and the water runs off. What do you think the salinity does in them? Do you think there'll be much salt in that area? No. There's nowhere for the salt to store, and it's basically fresh. So it's and what Andrew was saying, it's land load and water quality is actually, it's good water. And in the hazard sense, it's actually only a limited problem. Whereas the same geology, if you weather the geology and put a couple of barriers, like a barrier of rock in there, you'll end up with, and there's a bit more salt change in soil type, you will end up with a major salinity problem because the water gets into here. This is an actual landscape in the Yeovil area. You crop it for 3 years, it goes saline, you put pastures in it, salinity disappears. It's that dynamic. Very high salinity risk. So what is a HGL? It's an area that's affected by salt, the load, the amount of salt moving through, the salt connection to to the waterways. It's basically a risk framework essentially. Now we work with soils, regolith as Andrew explained, geology, climate, salinity impacts and landform. We try and understand what's going on. Sorry?
What's HGL stand for?
Oh, hydrogeological landscape. Yeah, sorry. So we put that into a bit of an understanding using and then integrate a bit of different data, which I'll show you as we go through, to produce flat maps and then concept diagrams of how things work in slice. So that's a flat map, gives you the area, and the other one is a sort of a process diagram. Now this is important for, where's my little helper? She's asleep. Yeah, take one and pass it on, Andy. Pass a few of those out, darling. So, one of the most visual features you will see in this landscape are the Sandstone Cliffs. Everything is horizontal, basically, in this landscape. So it's very much a flat landscape. We took a long time to work out what was going on here. There was 3 of us in that car driving. This was many years ago, probably 15 years ago, nearly. Driving and arguing about what was going on. We couldn't hide, so we decided to go to the pub in Ross and have a couple of quick schooners. And then it just dawned on us. It's all different layers, flat. So this is Narrabeen sandstone. This is Illawarra, and this is Shoalhaven. So that's gobbledygook to you. So these are the Sandstone Cliffs. If you're a geologist and you're interested in Illawarra, what's something that you see in Illawarra on the faces of the hills if you've been down to Wollongong? Coal mines. You don't see them. But you see there's a range of coal, and then you've got some other material. Same. Yep, Western Coalfields. This is actually that same material. So this is the Narrabeen sandstone. It's got you've got the geological units in there. You've got banks, walls. As you go up, I drove to Sydney yesterday and back, and I used to be able to name the units going up. What's the hill? Mount Victoria Hill. I'm a bit out of touch, but I know the top one is where they usually get you for the speed camera is Banks Wall sandstone. So it's a very building material quality sandstone. So this is This is free sandstone, and as you go down through the profile, you go into the Illawarra Unit. Now that Illawarra Unit may just have shales, some sandstones and silts in them, or it might have coal. In a coal measure, you'll have above the coal, you'll have a really salty material. They call it chitta, the white stuff. And underneath, you'll also have some coal. A few years ago, in the old Candos mine, we got a bloke to go in with a couple of bottles and collect water from the face and from dripping through. It was half seawater under here. This is fresh. So this is fresh. The water that goes in here is fresh. Hits this salty layer and it becomes very, very salty. If you've ever got a spring that pops out here, it's fresh. If you've got a spring that once it hits that material and goes through, probably salty. So, and then underneath you've got the Shoalhaven, which is usually the berry formation. So it's a flat layer cake. And depends on where you are in the landscape, how much of that you have, as to how things work in your landscape. So you've got water pours into a sponge, which is the cliffs. Then you've got a different layers through here. And if you've got a coal measure through there, you'll have a very salty outcome on the streams and down through here. Some of this area doesn't have any coal seam, doesn't have a coal seam present, so it's basically fairly fresh. And generally, if you're down in the, like this Glen Alice, Bourbon Creek landscapes, Glencoe landscapes, the salt will be in these little bits of the hills underneath, you know, basically on the edges of those little rises. So we'll go through a bit more, we'll crank down into detail, and I'll come back and reinforce it a bit as we go through. So that's understanding the geology. Then we understand the soils. This is the soils of the Capertee landscape. It's a range of alluvial, erosional landscapes. There's the soil types called bogey soil landscape. If you go on that side of Andrews, the East Bade, you can look it up. So basically all that's showing is that there are different soil types in different parts of the landscapes, from some alluvial soils, some sedimentary derived soils. Also, we did a fair bit of water testing, and there was a very good data set when we did this work. There was a chap, I forget his name, was running around doing water testing for us in each of the creeks on a monthly basis. And he gave us a really good indication of how salty things were. The creek down here, half seawater at times after heavy rain. Just that washed off front. Mm.
Was that 15 years ago or recently?
Recently. No, sorry, 15 years ago when things were...
Okay.
And so we went around and tested. So it gave us a bit of an understanding of the behaviour of the creeks in the area. And this is an older image. We've actually had two pieces of work. This work we've done for Capertee has just recently been published, and it's published to the East Bade. It's up there. You can actually it's a Google Map interface. You can go and pick up where you are, and it'll pick up what landscape you are. So we have altered a bit of this in the final version. We've collapsed a few units and done a bit of work with the boundary. But basically, there are different behaviours in the landscape in this area. Depends on where you are.
Whereabouts are we on that map? You think we're on roughly where Glen Alice is?
Too many locals.
I'm thinking it's a good dark circle myself.
No, it's there. We're there. I'm not navigating by geology.
Okay, very good.
So I know. So there's a variation in those. So there's a 20 plus, or whatever we've collapsed it down to, different ways water flows in this landscape, or interacts with salinity in this landscape. Now this is Capertee is a very saline landscape, has been in the past. In 1966, there was trials done here and at Rylstone on putting species into the ground to see what could grow. And I became a salinity officer for the district in 92, so from about 89 to 92 I was over here quite regularly doing work in this, and we've worked here on and off ever since.
So the species that are growing here are fairly salt tolerant?
Generally the ones that have been adapted, not too bad. There are some things that we could put in to increase their productivity. Andrew and I, this is quite a bit of an old... We do this sort of HGL work all across the state. We're currently working in the tablelands, filling in a few of these dotted areas. So we've got an understanding of a lot of these landscapes. Now I'm going to get you to work for a living. Now these are local examples. So in pairs, or I'll send one way. Or actually I'll keep one for myself. It'd be a good idea. You've got 4 different landscapes. Just have a quick look at them. There you go. Shoot it in that way. So you've got 4 different landscapes that have that look differently, and for each of so on a landscape you've got 4 different descriptions. What I want you to do is find out which description matches which landscape. Descriptions should be have to come across. That was silly.
More detailed map, and you said it's on that Google map thing. Was that the East Bay?
Yeah. I was hoping to be able to get it, but I checked. We don't have internet connection here. Yeah. How are we going? We got enough? Share. It's easier if you do it in groups. A couple. So, landscape 1. Anybody want to venture what that is? What? C? General consensus? And we've had a couple of A. Okay. Landscape 2. B. Landscape 3. A. And by default, so they're all the, landscape C is a basalt landscape, which is out there on the running stream. Landscape B is the really eroded, which is the other side of the school, just through here. Bourbon Creek, essentially. It's the really badly eroded, very.
That's the one that I was trying to
Yep.
talk about. Yeah.
Yep,
So
really bad.
Bruce, who was here, said in his day it was known as Grassy Hill.
Grassy Hill. There you
It
go.
was always green, and then all that erosion's happened.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Oh.
Bruce, so who said that? Bruce just said that the last workshop we had, that it was known as the Grassy Hill.
I could always remember it looking like that.
Yeah, made a mess. And it's a particular unit. It's a particular unit of this geology. It's the Nile subgroup. I don't know whether it's actually mentioned, but it's a particular formation of that group that actually does that. Has a really sodic layer in it, and it washes, and it's very, very saline.
And I think that's what I do remember from the last
It's very sodic and very saline. Yeah.
presentation in 2011. You said it's also up in Dunville Loop?
Yeah, Dunville Loop. Yeah. Yep. The other one, Port Macquarie, is this landscape D, which is all that rough country or timbered country out that way. It's different geology. It's this. It's the Shoalhaven group, the Berry formation. It's essentially, there's not much salt in it. It's mostly shales and silts. And the other one's Mount Marsden, which is just that one on top of the Dunville Loop. Landscape A. When you're driving through it, Mount Marsden, you're on the edge of the road, you'll see a few coal measures. The thick line in there is that Mount Marsden coal measure.
And then you said Dunville Loop.
It's on the top of Dunville Loop. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it wasn't the Nile one.
No, the Nile one we're going to talk about in detail in a minute. Righto, so that's the landscape variability. This is Bourbon Hills. We just talked about. That's the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's what it looks like. it is different to other landscapes because of the erosion. That's how we pull them out. We look at patterns in the landscape and try and push those patterns together. This is a pretty easy one because it's actually pretty easy to see. And that's a particular unit in the landscape, and that's it on Dunville Loop. It's an old soil con project from the late 80s and early 90s. It was where they tried to do some revegetation project works on it. So, it's a Permian Nile subgroup. So that's that formation of that general overall sequence. It's thicker and bigger in that unit. You know, where on a sea edge or at a beach, you'll have different layers of sand, big differences of sands and gravels. Same thing happens geologically. You've got a layer of this material. So that's that one, Bourbon Hills.
So hang on, so this one, you worked on it in the 80s, did you say? Is there any chance of it vegetating if it had been worked on, or is it a new life?
Hawkesbury Nepean Survey did a big project on just the other side of the school here. They dumped many tons of mulch on it.
And they put that huge dam.
Yep. So there is ways to deal with it. It's just that it's it's steep and it's very erodible soil, so it's difficult to deal with. There are low impact things you can do, like putting runners of like kikuyu or something that'll go in there, or doing something with it. It is hugely expensive to do much with.
There was a Bourbon Creek landcare.
Yep. Yeah. And so a lot of that was actually tree planting and doing, and some of it worked exceptionally well. Some of it fell down with maintenance. One of the big things is actually trying to maintain the ground cover on it to stop it eroding again.
There's been no tree planting down here, right?
No.
On the other side, there's a little bit.
Yep.
So that's the hill that Bruce said was called Grassy Hill.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't know why. This is one of the this is Bourbon Creek HGL. It's basically this low landform. We've actually, in the work we've done recently, we've collapsed all those low landforms into one landscape. So it's basically just those slightly rolling landscapes like we've got out the side here. Port Macquarie, once again, very rough, timber. The geology is up on its side, sitting, very shallow landscapes, Devonian fractured rock, forms hills, thin limestone beds, not very good agricultural soils, but very good park soils. Dunville Homestead is the top of Dunville Loop. Where's the coal layer? Illawarra Group. There's no salt in this landscape. The top of this landscape doesn't see salt. So that landscape, there's a whole stack of fresh springs in this area, and hence there's not much land salinity. The export of salt off it is low, and the water quality is good. There's very good water quality. But if you go to back further round Dunville Loop to Horse Gap to I think it's Jim and Marin Dunn used to be there. I don't know whether they're still there. There's a couple of different landforms. So the coal seam is right there. So you come down out of the cliff onto the short talus slope, you'll see salt sites. Magnificent salt sites, if you're a salt ghoul like me. But then the other thing in the landform, there's a bowl. This landform is a bowl. So the groundwater that I've seen 25 to 30 hectare white patches of salt on that land in after a wet season. Just comes up, stores the salt. So it's because of the landform is creating its more water's draining in, the salt side is salts are evaporating. So it's a large seasonal salt sites. So all these are variations of how things work in your landscapes.
And is Dunville Loop the head of our water catchment area?
Essentially, yeah.
It works. It starts there and makes its way.
Yeah, the top of the range goes back to Kudgegong, and then this goes to the sea. These are examples from Goulburn, just to give you a bit of the variability. This is all granite rocks. Pomeroy landscape, freshwater, hard granite material. PJAR is where you get a bit more cover. You get a lot of land sites on them, very white saline parts of the landscape. And this is an area where you don't see, this Lockesley, you don't see salt in the landscape, but you'll see spike rush and water, clear water running into the creeks. Which do you think is the worst salty landscape? Which one? Yeah, so it depends on what your question you're asking, is the point I was trying to make. Because this is a water quality, this is a big issue for people downstream. So the water runs in the through flow that Andrew was talking about. You don't see the salt until it pops out on the edge of the stream. So if you're managing the Goulburn River, not the Goulburn River, what's the one that goes through? Wonnadilly, yep. You actually need to probably put perennial pastures in this landscape. This one's an area where there's dilution, there's fresh water coming. You probably don't need to do much in this landscape. Whereas this landscape here, you might want to actually revegetate the saline salt sites. So actually plant some material on those salt sites. One of the things we have is a management strategy. So what we're trying to do is give a framework of understanding and then try and figure out what you might do in the appropriate landscape. So what we've produced, which I'll hand round, this is what we call a HGL template, a Hydrogeological Landscape template. It's got the location, the salinity, salinity as it is, a bit of a description about it, a cross section so you can help to understand that landscape, some detail about its hazard, pictures of the landscape. I like seeing things, see, touch, do. So I learned tactile. And then we've got sections on the geology, the soils, a bit of hydrogeology, and then the management, what we might do at the landscape. So Andrew is handing around that structure. So what we're saying, a landscape's got a function. Is that landscape a producer of fresh water? Is it a producer of fresh runoff water? Does it produce salty water that comes off the system? Does it generate high concentration water? Some of these landscapes generate absolute stacks of salt. They're very, very salty. If they come out of this layer, or some of that Nile group, they are very salty if the water comes out of that landscape. Then the next part of the structure is what management structure. What do you do? Can you buffer the salt? Can you actually? Are there areas? What do you need to put something over the discharge area of the site? Is that how you fix the site? You try and do grazing management or perennial pastures over the whole landscape, or can you do engineering actions? There are a range of management strategies that you'll put in place, followed by management actions.
Can I just ask about that? So along Dunville Loop, at some point, flumes were concrete. Were they as an erosion management or a salt management?
Both.
Right.
we had to actually change the structure of the concrete. It's marine concrete because the salt was actually going to eat it out. Mm.
So the purpose of that,
Was to control erosion, but to control the erosion we need to acknowledge there was a salinity impact. Yeah. It was done as a salt project actually,
so that still allows the salt to move
through the system. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is salt an input for anything useful? Like,
Yes, paint,
No, but I mean, you know, like we sort of just
human body.
yeah. So I mean, what can contain it and hold it in a biological way, in a useful form?
Salt is needed for most biological systems.
Yeah.
And as Andrew's point, you need to actually keep it in its proper place in a landscape. So if you can, as we say, not lock it up, but actually hold it in its place. The big issue we deal with is salt store. A lot of these landscapes, you go down and you have a couple of metres down the ground, you'll have a huge salt store where water's trickled down and left the salt behind. Water that moves through that will actually mobilise that salt. So if you've got something that's actually inputting water into that salt store, if it's excess runoff or something, you'll create a problem. So so salt makes good margaritas, keeps your beer cold. We have a situation where we break the landscape into understanding where we might put a specific management intervention. This is from the Bathurst area. So the different landscape segments. So upper ridges, upper slopes, mid slopes, lower slopes. And you can actually then attribute a whole range if there's a similar part of the landscape, you can attribute the right action for the right spot. So if it's a ridge top on this old, this is an old surface area, you can say, well, in that area we need to do X, Y, and Z, and here we need to do something differently, and here we need to do something. It's a way, and these are using standard soil mapping processes.
Is that a classification that's been used for a long time?
Yes. Yep. It's a standard process that's been used by soil surveyors since probably the year dot. And you'll see MA1 ridges, slopes, MA7 is a salt site. So how does that relate to this site? How does this relate to the Nile HGL? Ridges, sandstone. MA2, upper slopes and erosional slopes, those talus slopes. That's that part of the landscape. there's no MA5 in this, it's basically MA4, so it's mid-slope areas. MA9's the big colluvial area beside the edge of the alluvial plain. What do you notice about this this conceptual diagram on the way past? Sorry. Different structure east on one side to the other. Yeah, it's got the coal. So this side's in this landscape, this side's salty. This is where we're going this afternoon. This is fresh. This creek is very salty. Most of your problems from here and further up.
So that's west?
That cliff that you can see out there is that material. So that's, I get no.
That's the eastern side, so the coal seam on the eastern side.
Mount Marsden's back that way, so that's north. Yeah.
Cross section of the Nile Valley.
Yeah, cross section of the Nile Valley.
So that's a cross section, that should be west. Left hand side should be west.
from west to east.
Anyway, when we're down there,
So that
I'm right left dyslexic, so it makes life interesting.
Saying that roof face over there
Is that?
over there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So whatever it is, east, north, south, back to back.
So then you can actually, this is Mount Marsden, which we've some of us driven through this morning. You can actually then put the most appropriate landscape action to that. So this is those slopes, upper slope areas. So you've got a bit of a coal seam, so you've got a bit of a... Years ago, they tried to put a crayfish farm in that.
That's ingenuity.
So it was that it's the salty water,
There's use for the salt.
but it actually dispersed the clay in the dams. The dams leaked. It was a mess. But the things you can do is actually maintain the vegetation that's already there. If some of those areas where they did disturb them, you should probably plant them with trees to try and lock that salt that's back up in there. Improve the grazing management. Where you're on this slope here, this MA, you can actually do a range of actions. Improve the grazing management, native pastures, perennial pastures, and because this is a bit of salt stuff, you'll usually find a salt patch in here. You can establish some salt management pasture systems, which we did in that area. Sprinkle a bit of salt pasture out. Sorry?
Where's the, say, Dunville Loop in relation to that coal layer up near Mount Marsden? Is it above or below?
The Dunville Loop sits about here. The road sits about there. And interestingly, the next landscape around called Marlon Gate, that coal seam doesn't exist. So it peters out, and then you've got a bit of that Bourbon Creek stuff comes in over the top. It's the Cayley formation. Then you go further around and it's that Horse Gap unit. Then you go further around still and it's the Dunville Loop.
What's the process that ends up associating that salt with the coal? I mean, why does the coal seem so salty?
The coal is an old... Coal was formed in a swamp that basically... and the swamps evaporate out, so that as the process so the salt remains in system on the top of the coal, so the vegetation becomes coal and the salt still sits on the surface, and as things pour through, you'll quite often have a salty layer underneath the coal. The coal is relatively fresh, generally. We did some work with Ulan Mine not that long ago, and we found that if you pulled water they were mining straight off the face, it was drinkable water. But if you left the water in the pit where they were mining for any more than 2 hours, it got a salt signature very quickly, and you couldn't use it. So a lot of the work we did was actually just pulling that fresh water off very quickly, and then it became a resource to grow crops with. Got rid of the water problem. If you left it in there too long, it became salty, and then went through a reverse osmosis plant, to get to be able to use the salty water again, or the fresh water out of the salty plant. So if you can get what I'm talking about is using, for different parts of the landscape, there are different management actions that we apply to deal with the salinity situation. So you've got a plumbing situation, and then we overlay a management solution to that. And I will... So Glen Alice, we're basically sitting in these long valleys here. The rises, you get these rises that pop out. Grazing management, vegetating. So they're an area that you probably should try and vegetate. These slope areas, the edges of your alluvial areas are somewhere you might look at putting perennial pastures in. You could try and intercept salt, intercept some water that's moving in, creating above the salt site. You could try some farming systems such as putting cereals into into perennial pastures and, cereals into natives and vice versa. We'll try a range of salt-tolerant species. Trees will actually grow pretty well in some of these landscapes. Years ago, I forget the name of the property. It's I came over here, it would have been about 1990, big salt site. Didn't understand what the hell was going on. We made a recommendation to put saltbush in. The pH of the site was, we found out subsequently, 4 decisiemens. It's 4 pH, so it was quite acid. The saltbush didn't like it. But we tried another site as well, completely different chemistry, the saltbush. It's the property that had the bloke used to fly in planes from yeah, that's it. And so it started to build up. We learn a lot by seeing stuff, and experience is a good teacher. So in that case, it was we didn't quite understand the mechanics of the site enough to give exact information. I can see some blank looks around the room, so I'm going to have to go through this. It's probably the way I'm talking about it.
Do you have anything that's a bit further down the valley as well? Like, have you got windows there?
Yeah, there's a whole range of systems. These are the ones. So this was from a few years ago. We've Snake Hills was a figment of our imagination. It was where we nearly got bitten by a snake but it was actually a cap in a big hill. It's where there was a quarry, and we thought we should pull that out. But in reality, when we got it, the work reviewed technically, the person said it's such a small area, couldn't you combine it to a big area, which we did. And Glencoe, Bourbon Creek, and Glen Alice, we've actually merged. They're basically much the same sort of landscape. So we've, in the recent product that's now published on the web and published on OEH site, has the same thing. So you can see the huge variation. Function A, it's basically fresh water. That's what you want to do. Glen Rowan Mountain and Brogan View, those basalts and the big Pentonic crown is the same in those areas. Freshwater producers. H, high hazard material for sediment and saline materials. Then these are the strategies that you put in, and then they're the hazards. It's on your list. E is landscape receives and stores salt loads through irrigation or surface flow. And the strategies, so on this sheet, if I just pinch it for a minute, so on your sheet, they're the functions, the A's to E's, whatever, A's to H's, and the numbers are the strategies. And your other sheet in here are the actions that you can apply. Like VE1 is block planting of trees to manage recharge. So they're the actions you can actually do within that area.
Can I just check on those ones? Is the number 8, say for example, next to E or SR, is that related to what you do in, like, on the alluvial plain? Is that not on the back there?
That's
The one, it relates to the top of the hill and the 8.
no. I'm confused. People are getting confused very quickly.
Well, everybody's looking for their own little
Yep, I know.
information now. That's why. So it's not sort of more general. Everybody can see their own piece of stuff.
Do you think it's different if you own land here? Do you recognise something and then you go, oh, this is what I'm going to do because with my land here?
Well, I just did exactly that. I went, okay, E, and then look to see if it's like it's only engineering structure, whereas I won't do that. So it's like,
Okay, who lives where? Umbiella. So it's probably down in the flat.
One of the strategies, the Glen management strategy, dry
It's basically changing the perennial pastures, making it perennial pasture, lifting it. That's essentially what it means. Because we're stuffed by protocol and what you can and can't use. Okay, we'll go. These are examples. I'll get you to pass them around and we'll just go through a few. There's about 3 types.
Question at the back. So when you go to East Bay, you'll be able to find yourself on a map, right? And then you'll be able to say, on the right-hand side, it will ask you which layer of information you want. And you want hydrogeological landscapes. You'll click on that. That'll come up over the top of your house, town, farm, block, whatever. It will then say, you are in a word you may have never heard of. What was one of the ones this morning? Bourbon Creek HGL. You click on that, and this appears as a PDF. Right? So instead of carrying around vast volumes of paper, we now say, go to the website. Instead of giving you heaps of stuff that's about everyone else except you, we say, go to the website, find the stuff that's good for you. That make sense? Good?
So,
sure.
Because we've been looking at, through this program, Stuart Andrews came to talk about natural sequence farming. Are we going to look at maybe different land management systems?
Sure.
Is that what we're going to do? Sorry.
Yeah. If you want to burn a rainy day, turn this on. It's got basically the sum total of our 4-foot knowledge on it. And you can zoom in. Yeah.
So for this catchment, that's the individual. So I've just brought up, and it wasn't working last Friday. That's Mount Marsden. That's where Mount Marsden's distribution is.
Okay. Right, so you can click on it, it'll show you all of them, and then you click on one and say, where is that? Right?
So Marlon Gate, Horse Gap, Dunn's Farm, Dunville Loop, Dunville Homestead, Glen Alice, whole range all the way through. So they're all there. Glen Alice, we've got that little blip of Bourbon Hills sitting just there. So that's the Nile one here. So you can click on that and then it'll bring it up.
Yep. And then when you click on this, it's obviously you've clicked on highlight on the map, and then you can also. Have you got a slideshow on that? Didn't work. Okay. Then you can click on landscape description, and you get that. Right. You can leave it as a digital copy. You can print it out. Whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Right. And particularly, so although we've been talking about complexity all morning. Everyone's little universe is a bit less complex. At the most you might have 2 of these on your phone. Okay? And the LLS person might be challenged to learn about 30 of them in their district. But you know 30 veg eco, 30 veg associations.
But what
we only need to know what we need today.
What we do for our landscape, say up in Dunville Loop, could possibly affect the others.
Yeah.
So that's tough because we're looking at this project as trying to restore the hydrological function as a whole. So it does look what we do in our own little area affects our neighbour or the person in the next pack.
So what's your aim? What's the outcome of the restored hydrological?
My aim's a little bit big, but
no, what is it? The reason I'm asking.
I would like to know if there's a way we can restore the hydrological function in our catchment. Collectively.
What is hydrological?
I don't know. That's what we're hoping.
So the water doesn't just completely run off, it's actually soaking.
So we're saying we want to reduce runoff. Is that our outcome?
Well, I probably would like to ask you that question. What is it that we should be trying to achieve? Is there a function malfunction?
It's your landscape. What do you want to do? Some people are saying reduce runoff.
How about framing it more in terms of restoring the water cycle?
Right. So which bits are out, you reckon?
Because obviously,
What do you want to restore from, and what do you want to restore to?
It sounds like we
Water
need
and nutrient cycle
to
together.
possibly store our salt in the right place. Is that
Well, we
learn management skills.
Reduce salt export.
So if you want to hit land salinity, these are the areas you're going to hit. If the red stuff, it's a whole catchment. If you want to impact on load, they're the areas that you actually need to hit.
Right, so that's how much total volume of salt's leaving.
And you want to impact on what the water tastes like, or the EC concentration, they're the areas you've got to hit.
So obviously there's a bit of overlap, isn't there? But it's not total.
And if that's the general hazard, they're the hazard landscapes in terms of salinity.
the red ones?
Red ones.
I know what we want to do, what I want to do.
What do you want to do?
I want to understand, I care about the valley.
Yeah.
I love the fact that I'm near the upper reaches of the Capertee River. I would like to understand better what goes on here to make sure that I understand when there's some point in trying to avoid salinity, when it's just an inevitable part of that bit of the valley, and when there's things I can do to help it a bit, or not me, but we can do. And so what I wanted you guys here was to develop a better understanding of how the interplay of what's underneath there, of what comes down from the sky, of what we do to the land, of all these things that play together. And it's obvious, it's so complicated that as soon as you guys have got all this, 40 years of knowledge in your heads, try to share a bit of it, we all go, bleh.
It's not that complicated. It's gravity's working everywhere.
Yeah,
Gravity's working
big
everywhere.
lesson of the day, I think, is gravity.
Some places when gravity works, we get yucky patches in the paddock. Sometimes we don't see them and we get yucky things in the creek. It's that simple, right? If you want to prioritise your effort, you go to the highest hazard area. If your aim is to reduce salt land, to reduce salt export, right? If your aim is something else, right, we'll go somewhere else. But you've got to be clear on what you want to do. So I'm sorry to labour the point, but we could talk for another 2 hours about what we think is good for this valley, but we don't own it, and I'll be home at 5 o'clock sitting on my lounge. Okay?
But all these things in terms of the, because the project that we're running is really one around engaging with drought resilience.
Yep.
And it was around the the ideas, and this has definitely involved the discussion we've had with Stuart Andrews around rehydrating the land, basically trying to restore the capacity of the land to hold water better through those dry periods that we're having. And so it's been interesting to sit here because it seems the main point that you're talking about is when there's too much water and the salinity starts to become a big problem. Mm-hmm. Whereas we'd entered this journey from a point of when there's not enough water.
There was water 60 centimetres down.
Yeah.
It was
big
patches that were still.
When we first started the
So it's
project,
always
he's relating to
I know, and it does seem to be
Had
there
rain
is
forever.
because
It's a bitter pill for us to swallow as landholders. That salinity and erosion is caused by us wasting water. Right? That shows how out of balance we are. That, we're in drought, it'll all wash away.
Hold it in the landscape for longer.
Let's hold it in the landscape.
Absolutely.
So make use of the natural landscapes that you've got. We've been extension professionals for nearly 40 years, and we look at grazing management change, soil health improvement, and whole range of issues as key. The frame that we put it in is actually understanding the differences and the difference, the variability, and then what you can actually do in that particular part of the landscape. See, what we have a couple of situations where we went on a landscape, and there was a certain CMA invested millions in a particular part of the landscape. Their outcome was EC in the stream, but they were treating the land salinity, invested millions that did diddly squat. So it's actually understanding what you've got to do in those landscapes.
And it's the hardest conversation. The dirt and the rocks is easy. It's easy. If you don't think it's easy, you get a nerd to come and talk to you about it. But at the end of the day, it's really easy. Clarifying what your outcome is the hard part, right? Because we can tell you the same tactic, we can give you many examples of a tactic, a land management tactic that has had huge benefits, huge disbenefits, done absolutely nothing, right? Depending on the plumbing you put it on.
Okay, so I've been learning bits and pieces, and I'm totally convinced that this valley used to be a lot of swampy bits,
Yep.
and that as we produced stuff, we turned it so that all the water went, and we made little channels for the water to all run out. In our case, it runs pretty quickly for the Hawkesbury out to the ocean. So that instead of the water hanging around for us to use during droughts, or at least to be there, we've created a system over 200 years of channeling it out. So from there, I've watched how leaky weirs can slow down some of that process and push the water sideways out into the land around and keep that bit. I've observed this, I'm a witness to it. It improved the case of that little patch during this current drought, or maybe gone drought, who knows. However, that's all been happenstance. Maybe we happen to do that on the right place.
Yeah.
Maybe if we did that on Bourbon Creek, we'd create some big mess.
Mate.
And that's what I need you guys to tell me.
Exactly. Yeah. So what you're telling me is your hydrology management outcome is you want to see water at slower speed in your creek.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
in soil,
Where's the water coming from?
soil.
The mountains up here. So first of all, it runs down real fast. It's going to do that.
Out of the
And
national
then it
park.
does a whole lot of soil erosion at the upper reaches.
And surprising how much actually goes that way.
Into the sandstone, right?
Sideways there.
Yeah.
To make the actual split's about,
And then it comes out along the side somewhere.
depending if there's a barrier there or there's a change in slope, it'll come out.
So do you think has the hydrology of that part of the landscape, has that changed much in the last 200 years?
I would say it probably would have. The national parks have locked up land quite
So
high.
what's changed in there, do you think, from a hydrology point of view? So the change we've applied to the landscape has been where?
On the flat bits down the ranges.
So where do you reckon the changes are going to have to be if you want to turn that around?
Under the coal.
The bit we've changed,
So that's where,
right? If that's what's changed and we're not happy with that outcome, then maybe the change we need to think about is in this bit of the landscape.
and that's where we're putting the leaky weirs.
That's where the swamps were.
Yeah.
Can you briefly sort of explain, so if we've got organic matter, if we can build our organic matter through grazing management and...
Probably a good time for your talk, Willie. I think we'll delay lunch and we've got a talk to stimulate this discussion. You've stimulated the discussion before, so that's good.
That's good.
You're going out into the...
Yeah. I suppose I had a conversation with someone today
So
that
we could see grazing management right on out there.
yeah, and it's most of the
Laying
landscape.
out there.
It's most of the landscape. Okay. There's something wrong with this shed, right? We don't like the way that water's moving off it. Do we spend all our time fixing the gutter, or do we fix the roof? Fix the roof. Fix the roof. Well, what percentage of time should we allocate to fixing the gutter?
5 to 10%.
Let's work on the roof.
So work on higher than landscape?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are specific, there's hot sweet spots
Yes.
in this landscape,
Yeah.
and they happen to sit where you've got a problem inputting. If where the coal layer sits out, if you wanted to tree that, or where your Bourbon, your little bits of that Nile subgroup they're areas where you can actually intervene to get a bigger bang for your buck out of the system. But if you want to change this part of the landscape, it's changing the whole of the landscape, which Andrew will talk about.
Yeah.